Okay, good. Okay, good morning, everybody. It's 9:30. I'll call this virtual meeting to order. And as you would have seen from emails, virtual meetings like this, which take a lot of technical support from staff, apparently we can't run more than one at a time. So there is another meeting coming up later, a budget committee, which is quite important. And so we're going to get kicked off at 12:30. Well, it's a long time since I've had a meeting go on as late as 12:30. So I hope that we will be our usual diligent and efficient selves, and we'll finish well before that deadline so we don't have to try and meet again tomorrow. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming here today and all the technical people who put it all together. Members of the public who are watching, who wish to participate with respect to any of the items, should call 905-815-6095. We have a number of registered delegations today to speak on some of the items that we have before us. And of course, we've got the staff to assist. You've got the agenda materials. The usual format, the staff will make a presentation, we'll have the opportunity to ask questions, signal to me that you want to speak, I'll put you on the list. You will unmute yourselves, ask your questions, and when you're done, mute yourself and sit and watch the rest of the program. We have, today I don't have to read in everybody to the to membership, so I will just remind everybody that we are an advisory committee and that any advice we give will go to the Planning and Development Council at its meeting on Monday, November the 23rd at 6:30 p.m. And if anybody wishes to delegate at that meeting, they should call 905-815-6095 and set up that opportunity. So I think the next order is the any regrets, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Chairman, there are no regrets, but Carrie Colburn has not yet joined the meeting.
Yep. Okay, thank you. But we have quorum. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest with respect to any matters coming before the committee today? Seeing none, I'll move on to confirmation of minutes of the previous meetings. Councillor Duddock, you're moving that these minutes be adopted as circulated. Is there anyone opposed to that? Seeing none, the minutes are adopted. Okay, the first item of business today is item 4A, which is a heritage permit application with respect to the demolition of a greenhouse at 46 First Street. And I think it's Carolyn?
Yes, you've got it.
Good,
All right.
You're on, Carolyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So our first item is 46 First Street, and it's located in the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage Conservation District on the west side of First Street. So again, the property is designated as part of the Heritage District, but it's considered to be non-contributing. The home was built in the 1960s. And it does contain, though, two buildings of interest. The one is the gardener's shed, which is a remnant of the Romaine estate. Of course, the Romaine house is just next door and took up a large portion of this area, including this property originally. So there is a gardener's shed that still remains, and it is not a part of this application today. The owners aren't proposing to remove or change it at this point. The issue today is the greenhouse, which you see in the pictures here on the slide. The existing greenhouse is in the bottom right image, and that was constructed in 1997, and it replaced the one you see in the top right, which we believe was built in the 1950s. We have mapping, however, that shows there was a greenhouse attached to the gardener's shed as early, I should say, as 1910, and likely earlier than that. The issue today is that when the subject property was subdivided from the original estate, the property line was actually right through the greenhouse. They didn't jog around the existing greenhouse at the time. And so the issue we have is that the existing greenhouse in the bottom right is straddling two separate properties. And in order to resolve this issue, the applicants and the owners of 46 First Street are proposing to demolish the existing greenhouse since it is not considered to be a historic structure. Oops. Just on the left-hand side, this is just showing an old fire insurance map. So you can see at the top there is the greenhouse and the gardener's shed that was there at the time. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the survey. Outlined in orange is the portion of the greenhouse that actually goes onto the neighboring property at 52 First Street. So there are basically two options. One is to pick up the structure and move it, or to demolish it. And there were concerns about it being able to move it properly without it falling apart. So again, because it's not considered to be a heritage structure, the owners are proposing to demolish it. And again, this is the gardener's shed, which will remain. The only thing that will be changed there is that the east side of the building where it connects to the greenhouse will have to be repaired. So again, the existing greenhouse was constructed in 1997 and replaces what we believe is a 1950s greenhouse and is therefore not considered to be of heritage value and can be demolished. It is of a certain size, though, that we were not able to delegate this application to staff, and it needs to come to the Heritage Committee and Council for approval. So again, the gardener shed is to remain, but there will be minor repairs on the east wall of that shed. And the application, the staff recommendation is just that the application for the demolition of the greenhouse be approved and that the heritage permit expire 2 years from the date of final approval. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Good, super, thanks, Carolyn. Okay, so you've heard Carolyn. Councillor Duddock?
Thank you, Carolyn. The original greenhouse, I do believe, might have been a Lord and Burnham. And just to give a bit of background, my husband and I demolished the huge 18 by 36 Lord and Burnham greenhouse that used to be on the original Bailey estate and moved it over onto the other side of 14 Mile Creek. And so that looks very similar to what we had previously. Obviously, it's newer now. They've obviously renovated with new windows. Do you know if they've offered it to any, and that's something the owner has to decide, and I know that has no bearing on our application, but I'm just thinking of someone like Oakville Green or somebody else who may want to take advantage of the greenhouse. Do you know if it's been offered?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the councillor, I don't, and we could ask and request, because as you know, salvage is something we always propose or support with these cases. Because it was built in the 90s, I hadn't thought of it, but you're right, there could be some groups that could be interested, so we can certainly reach out to them and see.
That's great, thank you.
Good, thank you. Any other questions of Carolyn? Okay, so is there anyone else out there in the great wide world who wishes to join us to speak to this? Madam Secretary, anyone indicated an interest?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Andrew McCormick and Heather McCormick wish to delegate.
They do, okay. Or perhaps it's just a question, does anyone have a question of the delegates? Here we go, Andrew. You need to be unmuted.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You need to unmute.
Yep, so you've heard the presentation. Is there anything else that you would like to say to the committee?
That we really wouldn't like to take down the greenhouse.
And the question that if somebody was interested in carting it away, would you be amenable to that?
That would be my mother.
Yep.
Isn't connected to audio.
Yeah, you are.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I don't think it would be worth carting away because really, even though it was built to look like a greenhouse, it's not. We've just always called it a greenhouse.
It's a dwelling, really.
A structure that if somebody wants to cart it away, by all means, because it's going to cost us a lot of money to take it down and cart it away. So please, anybody come and cart it away.
That's a good answer.
But we would really like to not take it down.
Oh, I understand that. Okay, so were there any questions of the delegates? No? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to the board, any discussion? Somebody like to give me a motion? Councillor Duddock, is that a motion to approve the staff recommendation? Okay, everybody, the motion before us is to approve the staff recommendation. Is anyone opposed to that motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried. Okay, super. Thank you very much, Mrs. McCormick. Are you related to Susan McCormick?
Susan yeah, I have a daughter who's Susan McCormick.
Okay, I used to work with her at Hoop.
Oh, exactly.
So would you please give her my love the next time
I
you see her?
certainly will. She often talks very fondly of you.
Okay, super. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the next item is item 4B, which is a heritage permit application with respect to 39 Allen. And is that Susan?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it is.
Off you go.
Okay, so we have another heritage permit application to discuss today, and it also does involve a demolition as well of a non-historic property on Allen Street, right at King Street. And so it kind of fronts onto, or looks across the street rather, to the parking lot of St. Andrew's Church, if you're trying to place the property. So the property is designated as part of the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage Conservation District, but the existing residence, as you can see in this photo, is considered non-historic, non-contributing, was built in the 1960s. This also would have been one of the structures constructed after the severance of the Romaine estate that we just were talking about on the other application. So the application before us today is to demolish the existing house and to construct the new residence. And so because the existing residence is non-historic and non-contributing, we do not have a problem with that proposed demolition. Here's just a shot of the house in the streetscape. As you could have seen it earlier this summer. There are quite a number of mature trees in this, or on this property and in the area. None of them are proposed to be removed as well. And so you can see our subject property kind of tucked back into the corner there. And so what's being proposed for the site is a new 2-story home. We've got the site plan here. You can see, again, a number of those mature trees are still noted on the site plan, and construction will be quite careful to ensure that they remain safe and healthy. The design of the new residence overall is a traditional style with very kind of classical details in terms of its front portico, a hipped roof, and multi-pane windows. Just taking you around the elevations of the proposed structure here, you can see that in addition to the front portico, obviously fronting onto Allen Street, there is also a covered porch area at the back as well that kind of echoes that traditional classical design details. And this is the rear elevation of the property. So this is obviously what will face the backyard. And coming around to the side of the property as well. In addition to what you see in your agenda package, the architects have also recently, just very recently, completed a couple of 3D renderings that I've included here on the slides today to help give you a more realistic idea of how this new residence will appear in the streetscape. It's shown relatively close up because you have to get in past those trees, but you can see that the garage is recessed from the front plane of the main residence and also sits slightly lower in accordance with the guidelines of the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage Conservation District Plan. And this is a rendering in 3D of the backyard where you can see that a kind of covered outdoor space as well. Here we have a composite of the streetscape so that you can see in color above what's existing right now. And then below you can see the proposed residence as it sits next to its neighbors. And so it's generally, in terms of sizing and proportion, in keeping with other homes on the street as well. In terms of the heritage assessment, measuring the proposed application against the guidelines in our brand new 1st and 2nd Street Heritage Conservation District Plan, we do feel that the proposed residence does meet the guidelines in regards to the rhythm, alignment, spacing, setbacks, massing, and orientation. The street does have a wide variety of existing setbacks, as well as massing in the current building stock. And so we worked with the architect to ensure that the building is appropriately sited and oriented within the street. So it's not set as far back as the 1960s building was. It's actually pushed a little bit closer to the street so that there's a better transition from the building to the north through to the building located to the south. The height is within the permitted zoning for the area. As I've already noted, the architectural style is kind of a modern interpretation of classical design, which is certainly appropriate for the character of the district. The roof style, the hip roof with dormers, and the materials are generally appropriate. It's clad in wood siding. The dormer windows and windows are appropriate in scale and design for the traditional design and also within the Heritage District. And we also have no issues with the front main entrance and its front portico. And as I've noted, the integral garage, which of course is attached to the building, is lower than the main residence and has also been slightly stepped back to ensure that it is not the most prominent feature of the building. Therefore, the staff recommendation before you today is to approve the demolition of the existing residence, which would not happen until a building permit is issued for the existing residence, so that we avoid having empty lots in our streetscape. That's included as a detail in your staff report. It's not in the staff recommendation, doesn't need to be. And so once the demolition has been completed, construction of the new residence can begin. And one of our regular conditions, obviously, is that the final details on the new doors, windows, and colors be submitted to Heritage Planning staff for final approval before they are installed. And that this heritage permit expire 2 years from the date of final approval by council. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Good, thank you, Sue. Right, so you've seen the description, and it always helps me to see these 3D drawings. I'm sure that when Jerry looks at architectural plans, she actually sees the images that we all saw today. But for those of us who are not quite so gifted, it really helps to see it that way. Any questions of Sue? Okay, good. Does Emily or John wish to add anything at this point? Jill, are you in contact with them?
Yes, just, there's a slight delay, Mr. Chairman, to bring them
Okay,
in.
and have you had anyone else indicate a desire to
No,
speak?
Mr. Chairman, I'm just bringing Emily and Gus, or Emily and John
Okay.
into the meeting.
You're muted still, John. Thank you, John. John, you've heard the presentation from Sue. Is there anything that you would like to add?
Oh, simply that this is a style that our client was very strongly passionate about, and we feel that after working with staff that we've come up with something that fits very nicely, well scaled, well set back. Worked with the planning department, and through committee of adjustment, we received a minor variance for the some additional coverage, which really amounted to the area of the covered porch at the back, and so they agreed that it made very little impact. So I think Sue's done a great job of explaining our position.
Good, super. Does anyone have a question for John or Emily on this? Nope. Okay, super. Thank you both. Councillor Gittings.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be happy to move the staff recommendation for this item.
Okay, thank you. So we've got the motion. Is there any discussion, any further questions anybody has? Okay, so the motion's on the floor to approve the staff recommendation. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next one is 93 Bronte Road. And I think that's you again, Susan?
Yes, it is, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so off you go.
All right. Okay. It seems to be a demolition-heavy morning. This is a notice of intention to demolish that has been received for a property that is listed, not designated, under Section 27 of the Ontario Heritage Act. This is the property located at 93 Bronte Road. You can see it here. It's just off of Lakeshore Road West. And it's kind of just opposite a number of commercial buildings that then kind of lead down into the Bronte Harbor area. So the property was added to the Oakville Heritage Register as part of the listed not designated properties in 2009 when we did a very large update to the Heritage Register. The description of why the property was added is for its potential cultural heritage value for its vernacular frame house. We didn't have a whole lot of information on it at that point in time other than, I believe, a projected impact date of, I believe, circa 1910. The owner has submitted a notice of intention to demolish for the building, and so the 60-day clock is now ticking, and the subject notice must be dealt with by council by December 22nd of this year. When we look at any type of heritage application, we use a planning framework that is guided by a number of documents that I think we're all familiar with. The provincial policy statement, which was recently updated in 2020, as well as the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, which was updated in 2019. And both of those documents function together with the Ontario Heritage Act by the shared principle that cultural heritage resources shall be conserved. And it's the Heritage Act, of course, that sets out the procedures for evaluating, protecting heritage resources at the provincial and municipal levels. And this leads us to the use of Ontario Regulation 906, which is the criteria for determining whether or not a property has cultural heritage value. And so any property that is considered for long-term conservation through designation under the Heritage Act must meet the requirements of Ontario Regulation 906. And so you'll note that in the agenda package, there is a very lengthy heritage impact assessment that has been completed by the heritage consultant for the applicant. It reveals that the structure at 93 Bronte Road was constructed during John Ingledew's tenure on the property sometime between 1895 and 1905. We don't know a whole lot about Ingledew other than that he was the second postmaster of the Bronte Village Post Office, and he also operated a shoe store in the post office building. The building itself is a wood frame vernacular style building constructed at the turn of the century. It has been quite heavily altered. Both itself and the surrounding area have seen a lot of changes over the years. In addition, there was formerly a contextual association with the post office building, but of course that has been relocated now to Ontario Street as part of the Bronte Quad development. And so in the evaluation provided in the Heritage Impact Assessment, which staff generally are in agreement with, against Ontario Regulation 906, the recommendation is that the wood frame building is not a rare, unique, representative, or early example of any type of particular style, type, expression, material, or construction method. And while the historic association with Ingledew is interesting, he has not been identified as a person of significance to the community overall. The property no longer has sufficient physical, functional, visual, or historic connections to the surrounding area, and its relationships to neighboring properties have certainly changed over the years with the development of many properties around it. As well, this includes the relocation of the post office that happened in the early 2000s. And so just to take you through a couple of the images that you see in the Heritage Impact Assessment, you can see here we do have a relatively simple vernacular structure. It has been heavily altered over the years. There are no original remaining windows, although some of the openings are probably original. There have been additions to the building made, changes in siding and cladding, the addition of non-functional shutters, and probably the enclosure of what might have been a front porch at one time. And so the conclusion is that 93 Bronte Road does not have significant cultural heritage value and therefore does not merit designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. However, while we have noted that the property has some interesting historic associations, and we always like to take the opportunity to commemorate the history of Bronte when we possibly can, we have talked to the property owners to ensure that there is a form of commemoration on the property within any new proposed developments. And so in order to ensure that that occurs, we do recommend that we enter into a heritage easement agreement with the property owner. That generally involves the taking of some minor securities to ensure that we have the appropriate funds available to ensure that the commemoration is completed if development plans fall through. And then that heritage easement agreement would be lifted following the completion of the commemorative works to the satisfaction of the town. We'd also recommend that the owner allow for the salvaging of any architectural elements of the building where there is interest. We don't have a list of features that we feel would be of interest to anyone, but it's standard practice for us. And we certainly will put the word out to local historical societies and other designated property owners that if they are interested to please work with us, and we'll work with the property owners to ensure that that can happen in order to avoid any material that doesn't have to go to the landfill. And so the recommendation before you today is that we remove the property at 93 Bronte Road from the Heritage Register, and that prior to demolition, the property owners allow for the salvage of historic materials from the house if it's so desired. And then that the property owner enter into a heritage easement agreement with the town prior to the demolition in order to ensure the history of the area is commemorated within any future development on the site. And then that the town solicitor be authorized to discharge the heritage easement agreement once the works have been completed to our satisfaction. So I'm happy to answer questions that you might have, and I do know that there are representatives of the property owner as well to help me answer those questions. Thank you.
Super, thanks, Sue. So as usual with this type of thing, the property is on the register. When something is happening, like an application for demolition, you look at it through the lens, either it's not worthy of designation or it is worthy of recommending to council that we move to part 4. These are the only two options that we have. So in this case, you're telling us that it is not eligible for a part 4 designation.
In staff's opinion, we don't feel that it's worthy of heritage designation. I would also note that at this time, there is no proposed development application in for this particular property yet. We certainly have had pre-consultations in the Planning Services Department with the property owner, but they're well aware that they need to address the question of whether or not of this heritage building, potential heritage building, actually has heritage value and has to say or not, so that they can adjust their plans accordingly. And so it was our instructions to them to deal with the heritage issues first before submitting their development application, and that's what they've done.
Yep, good. Okay, super. Any questions of Sue? Okay, no questions of you, Sue. Now, I know that we do have a delegation available for questions. Does any of you have a question that you'd like to put to the author of the quite extensive heritage report that was included in your package? Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. I can see you've joined us. Any questions of Elizabeth? Elizabeth, okay, before that, is there anything you want to add, Elizabeth, to what Susan has said?
No, I don't think so. That was a good summary of the lengthy report, but I'm obviously very happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Councillor Gittings, did you have a question? Councillor
No, Chair. No, Chair, I'm good, thanks.
Oh, you didn't. I thought you were waving at me. I know that Kathy had. Kathy, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, similar to Councillor Gittings, I don't have a question. I just wanted to commend you on the report. I think it's extremely thorough, and it really gives us a sort of vote of confidence that when we go through something like this, that the decision we're making is the right decision. So I'd be happy to make a motion to approve. And again, thank you for an extremely thorough report.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Right. Thank you, Elizabeth. So, and we've got a motion on the floor, but is there any other discussion, Jay? Would you like to speak?
I just wanted to ask if there was any potential in the new development, if this is the appropriate time to ask the question, to preserve the element of promenade down Bronte Road to the lake. This is an area that all of Oakville residents enjoy, and it is a point of quite a lot of seasonal summer pleasure to walk down Bronte Road, especially from Lakeshore, meander down there, buy an ice cream and walk to the lake. In the new development, will they maintain this element of promenade? Because actually today, what we're doing with this, we're actually pretty well putting a nail in the coffin of the experience of Bronte as we know it historically. So we just... And from the report, it seems that from the report and from staff's work, it seems that the research has been done and the conclusion is seems inevitable. But we are making change, and we are. This is one of those sad situations where we as a town can preserve a tree up the street on Bronte Road, but we aren't able to preserve an experience of Bronte, which is very historical. So the question is, can we at least in the development have an opportunity to preserve the experience, the heritage experience of the street?
I think that's probably a question of Susan. This is a heritage committee, and what we're dealing with is a single heritage application. The planning and development side, Susan, can you add to that?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and I know that Martin, I believe, who's the planner for the property owner, I believe was available for questions as well. He might be able to help me fill in some of the blanks, but I can assure you, Jerry, that the street corner itself is considered a very important street corner for the town of Oakville, especially in Bronte, this corner of Lakeshore and Bronte Road. And our urban design staff have certainly been very involved in the pre-consultation meetings so far to ensure that the pedestrian realm is very strongly considered in how the design of any new proposed development will be considered. And so I would say that your concerns certainly are reflected by the town's own policies as well for this particular area. And if Martin has anything else to add, that might be helpful.
Okay, Martin, do you want to add something? You're still on mute. There you go.
There we go. There you go. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Martin Parker-Poem here from West Consulting. I am the planning consultant for the owner of the property. And to Susan's comments, yes, we've been working significantly with town staff, planning and urban design to treat the corner of Lakeshore and Bronte with some special intent. The official plan has that corner as a special node. So the way we treat the building for pedestrian movements, as well as the building itself, will require some special attention, which we're working through with staff on. And in terms of the pedestrian movements on the site and around the site, we're putting the building back from Lakeshore to ensure that we have that wide boulevard for people to move, and to ensure that the ground retail uses we're proposing have that ability to interact with that streetscape. And one of the elements that we've been asked to include as part of the development is a north-south link from Lakeshore through the property that will eventually connect to land to the south. So on our east property line, we're reserving 4.5 or so meters that will ultimately form part of a 9-meter pedestrian walkway that kind of cuts mid-block for this intersection to allow for pedestrian movement. So to the comments made by the committee, yes, we're taking this fairly seriously. We've had at least 4 or 5 meetings with staff, and we will continue to do so to ensure that that objective is.
Okay, good. Thank you. Brenda, did you want to ask? Unmute.
Yes, thank you very much, Drew. I just wanted to echo Jerry's comments about the cultural use and accessibility of this area. And I am concerned, and I know this is probably outside of the exact purview of the committee, but I am concerned at the corner there on page A12 of the drawings that were the massing study that was provided, that it's a wall of brick at the pedestrian level, and how people driving up toward that intersection, particularly coming from the west, driving east, will perceive that as a wall as they arrive at that intersection. So that would just be a comment that I don't find that meets that goal of being accessible and warm to the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Brenda. I mean, I know that's slightly outside our remit, but these are good comments, and we have the opportunity to make these comments when the people who should hear those comments, perhaps, are here to listen and to pay attention. So thank you, both of you, for that. Okay, any other discussion? I think, Kathy, you had made the motion. Yeah. Okay, so if there isn't any further discussion, I'll put the question. Are any opposed to the motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried. Thank you very much, everybody. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is, if I can find it, it's the review of a development application for 187 Front Street, and I think that's Carolyn?
Yes, correct.
Okay, good.
So, what we've got here is a property at 187 Front Street, which is located in the in the old Oakville Heritage Conservation District. It is a single detached home on the north side of Front Street, and it was constructed in 1965. So it's considered to be a non-contributing property because the house itself is not historic. And the application we have that we're reviewing today, again, this is not a heritage permit application. It is a review of a site plan application. It's to demolish the existing house and to construct a new two-story house. So in terms of process, the reason why we're looking at it today is that because the property is located within 50 meters of Lake Ontario, it requires site plan approval. So this is the first part of the process that we're bringing to the Heritage Committee for comments. The applicants are also proposing some minor variances, so they would also require minor variance approval as well as a heritage permit for the new home. So this is just the first step to bring the general application to the committee for comments. And again, it's a new two-story home. We'll show you the drawings in a minute. It's a fairly contemporary design, but with more traditional gable roofs, large window openings. There are front and rear balconies. The garage has been designed in the basement. As most of you know, garages are always sort of a tricky one to figure out in the Heritage District because we don't want them to be too prominent. So the applicants have proposed to put the garage in the basement at the rear of the property. The way the grading is with this property, it would work so that you wouldn't really see the garage from the street. And the application does also include the removal of 2 trees on the property, which I'll show as well. So as it's proposed today in the drawings that you see in the application or in the agenda is there are 2 minor variances required. The first is a front yard setback of 4 meters, whereas a minimum of 6 meters is required. And the second is the proposal of a residential floor area of 42.13%, whereas a maximum of 30% is permitted. So I'll just take you through that. Here is the site plan showing the proposed new home. So in terms of the setbacks, what they have proposed is the left side, left portion of the building would line up with the house to the west. And then the right side portion of the house would line up with the setback of the house to the east. With setbacks, we are often supportive of a minor variance for different setbacks from a heritage perspective if it's appropriate for the site. And so in this case, they are proposing that, and planning staff don't have any, considerable issues with that, because one of the things we do like to do is make sure that the new homes line up with the adjacent homes. And then the second thing, again, is the residential floor area. As you can see in this drawing as well, there are 2 X's, the one at the front of the house that is for the maple tree, the Japanese maple tree, and then one you can see in the back where the swimming pool is. And I should note, I failed to mention there's 2 little ones at the very back of the property too as well. So here are some 3D perspective views of the proposed home. So again, it's the larger 2-story home in the center there. The homes to the west and to the east are 1 and 1.5 stories, and the applicants are proposing a 2-story home. It is within the limits of the height for zoning. Here's another view of it, again looking from the south. And here are the drawings. So they're proposing wood siding with a brick at the base and a brick chimney. The front, there is a projecting overhang over top of the front doors. This will be a 2nd floor balcony with access from a door. This is the rear of the property, more larger contemporary window openings at the rear. And this is the side of the property. So this shows you how the garage would work. Again, the grading from the street goes up and then back down towards the back of the property. So this is how they would access the garage at the side of the property. And then this is the west side of the property, and you can see the brick chimney on that side and wood siding. We've got the roof plan on the left side here. It's generally a gable roof with a flat roof, a couple sections. On the right hand, we've got the basement plan. Again, these weren't included in your agenda, but I brought them here today. Ooh. Sorry, I'm trying to change to the next one. Oh, okay. So here on the left side is the 1st floor plan, and on the right is the 2nd floor plan. Okay, just showing these 2 trees here to be proposed to be removed. Again, you can see the Japanese maple in the front and a larger maple tree at the back. So the site plan application will continue to be processed by planning staff. What we're looking for today is for comments from the Heritage Committee. Those comments, along with Heritage planning staff, will be taken into consideration with the planning staff who are processing the site plan application. And if the site plan application was to be supported, the applicants, again, would still require minor variance application and heritage permit approval, which would come back to the Heritage Committee. But today what we're looking for is comments, and we do have Gus Ricci, the architect, I believe, will be joining us today as well. And hopefully I can answer any questions, and if he can't, he would be able to answer those questions for you. That's it.
Hey, thanks, Mark. So if you give us back the screen, that's it. Super, thank you. So today we're not approving the house, right? We're not approving the plans for the new home that's going to be built there. This is the site plan, which would permit the demolition, I guess, as part of that, and then other issues related to site planning. The coverage, the 30 and 42%, puzzles me because it doesn't present as a monster home. Like it's 3 bedrooms. I mean, it's not one of these 6-bedroom, 8-bathroom type houses that people want to build these days. I just wondered what was causing that compared to the house that's already there.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and perhaps Gus Ricci will be able to help with this as well. I know there have been discussions lately about whether or not the basement is included because of the way the garage is, and I'm not sure if there's been any determination on that, so maybe Gus could be able to provide more information on that. But you're correct, it's not a really large home, but it is also not a very large property.
Yeah, but it has a 2-story house on it right now, which
Correct.
Would have been 3 bedrooms and a couple of public rooms. Anyway, so we'll maybe ask that question of Gus when we get there. So let's give the committee the chance to ask any questions they might have of you and your presentation. Anybody wish to speak? Yes, George.
Can you hear me now? Okay, I just had a question to Carolyn, wondering whether, in fact, the architect has provided I guess on page 199, it shows, and I think you showed on your slides 199 and 200, the streetscape, if you will. Did the architect provide you with a sketch or a rendering of somehow that showed what the current house looks like compared to the other 3 on that block?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, we don't have any perspective drawings like this. We just have the survey showing the existing house, but I don't believe he's done up with any of the existing house because we don't usually require that.
But the difficulty I've got, maybe this isn't the proper forum to discuss this, but if you walk down that street, I mean, I lived there for 40 years, so I know the street and I know the house. But the house that's there currently is much lower than than the new house proposed. And in fact, the houses are stepped down the street to the corner as the street slopes. But this juts right out on top of everything else, and it's much higher than the current house. If you look at if you stand across the street on Stewart's fence, you could have a look and see that the current house is much lower and more in keeping with the guidelines in Section 3. Now, I'm not sure this is the point you bring this up, but it just seems to me that the thing is out of whack. You look at Section 3 of the plan, the guidelines. For example, the procedure says the present 3-1, the present character of the district be maintained or enhanced through careful control over construction, relocation, and alteration. And down in further under sub B, that the proposal be sympathetic to the district's character. Well, it doesn't appear to be, because it jumps out at you in comparison to the other three houses in that block. So that's why my initial question was whether or not he had shown you what the current house would look like in that slope as compared to what's being proposed, because it's much too high, much too steep. Thank you, Ed.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to George, the only other thing that could help is looking at the streetscape photos. So starting on page 205, and I know it's not exactly the same to compare to the drawings, but it does show you a little bit in terms of how the existing home fits into the streetscape, which might help for comparison.
Yeah, but it's much lower. If you stand there, as I have for years and years, and I knew the people that owned the house, it's much lower than what's being proposed. And I think if you want to keep the character of that little area, that little block, I think this jumps out at you. That was my initial thought, and I just wondered if there was a comparison.
Okay. That's good, George, and I'm sure Gus is taking a note of all of this, so when we get to him, I'm sure he will address that point. I think these are good questions for him. But remember, we're looking at the site plan at the moment and not the actual house, so it will come up later, but I think this is a good time to signal sort of where you might be coming from when the actual heritage application hits the desk. Has anyone? Yes, Daniela, Jerry? Daniela?
Yeah.
And then Jerry.
Okay, hi, thanks. I guess the items that we should be looking at today are, number one, the setback. I would assume that's relevant for today, the setback alteration.
It's really, even the general overall design of the home, because when we're looking at the height and the footprint and everything, it all fits into actually how it sits on the site. So what I would say is we're not getting into details in terms of, what wood siding are we looking at, but really the form of the home, the footprint, its overall massing, the location of the driveway, the setbacks, all of that.
Okay, so given that, I have a lot of concern about the setback, first of all. I think to refer to the house to the west, as the reference point, that's a very small one-story. And to be such a high two-story, it dwarfs the house beside it. And this street matters so much in terms of the Oakville experience and the pedestrian experience. And I think any loss of coverage in terms of foliage and trees really matters. So I'm concerned about the massing, the setback alteration, the loss of coverage in terms of trees. Because looking at the streetscape, that means there will be no trees of any age in front of this house. So it's not ideal for me. I don't think it fits the land. I don't think it fits the streetscape. I don't think it adds, and I don't think it complements. I think it dwarfs the houses beside it, which I think matters. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan.
Okay, thanks, Daniela. And thanks for that clarification too, Carolyn, because we're not approving the house though. The house will come back. And if we say that we don't like certain aspects of it, it's too high or whatever, that could still be dealt with at the heritage application stage. To what extent can we determine that at this stage?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if the heritage permit application process ended up changing the design of the house significantly, they would have to come back for a resubmission for site plan approval. So we really do want to make sure that we're doing these things simultaneously and making sure that, you know, everyone's sort of happy with all of the different processes at the same time, because there's no point in doing a site plan application, then doing a heritage permit, and they don't get approval for a home, and they have to make so many changes that they have to come back for site plan. So really what we're looking for is, again, not details in terms of the color of the siding or landscaping details, things like that, but we really do want to make sure that there is an understanding of where everyone's comfortable with going on this house in terms of its location and footprint and massing, so that it's all done simultaneously.
So the inputs we're getting, like from George and Daniela and others at the moment, I'm not quite sure. You're saying you're going to hear those things and that they may well perhaps impact the site plan application, because all we're asked to do today is to receive the report.
Correct.
And, you either receive it or you don't. I mean, but that doesn't say anything about whether we like it or not.
Correct, Mr. Chair, but we are taking notes. So the clerks and myself, staff, we are taking notes, and actually they will go into the minutes as well. So the comments that the committee is providing today, the actual recommendation from the committee is really just to receive the report, but the comments that we're hearing will actually get incorporated into the minutes.
Well, that's good. So George, everything that you said, Danielle, everything that you said will be recorded. So anybody else wishing to speak? Jerry? And Brenda, did you say? Yep, okay, Jerry and then Brenda.
I have to say, I'm going to give you my subjective opinion here. On this street, this house here was one of my least favorite in the experience of walking west on Front Street and walking east for that matter. So personally, I welcome, a new intervention here. And I have to say that overall, this design, I find it a positive intervention. I think it is bold, but what it does do, and I think that the setback, the way that it addresses both the east and the west, I think is a very it's a very positive experience in that, you're setting back to, it creates a bridge. You set back to the west house, and then you step back and set it back to the east. So I think the experience of setback is handled nicely. The idea of the garage in the lower level is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. You remove the whole concept of welcome to my house by welcome to my garage door on that Front Street, and I think that's a positive experience for the street, to eliminate the garage door completely and go underneath. If you've got the turning radius, wonderful. What this also creates as a positive experience in this area is it creates a visual corridor that is not there. Presently, what you have is the second story garage. And I think to address George's concern, optically, because there is the one story garage, now you no longer have that one story garage, you have the visual corridor, and it creates a bit of a corner experience for the house. And I think that there is an opportunity here, which I didn't see in the drawings, to address this corner experience, because now you have the visual corridor of the driveway, and because you're going down into the garage, it opens up that whole area. But perhaps, I'll just throw out an idea here. You have a stairwell here, and perhaps an idea to step down visually is to bring that stair element perhaps as a little tower, or create a roof on it to minimize that whole side view that you see if you're walking west, because you'll you'll view the house on its side rather than addressing it as a corner. So there's an opportunity there to do something architectural with stepping it down and making it welcoming to that, to the eastern end. You know, it is an infill. I think it's an interesting infill. It's an opportunity. It looks like there have been heritage forms that have been abstracted. They're all there. The gable has just been abstracted in a new way. And I think it's an interesting infill, and there's a great potential here. It needs some refinement based on the comments that we've heard. In terms of landscaping, I don't see why that modern or mature trees can't be planted back in the front of the building to create some greenery, you know, a bridge of greenery from east to west. But I think it's a positive intervention.
Good, thanks, Jerry. I think a number of us share your view of the contribution that particular house made to the district. There was a fire there, if you recall, a number of years ago, and many of us had kind of vaguely hoped it might have burned down altogether. But in fact, it got repaired, and now it's getting changed. Brenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think what I want to do is find some sort of middle ground between what Jerry just said, because I do think there are elements here that are brilliant. To get rid of the garage altogether from a visual perspective is amazing. I do echo, though, Daniela's concerns that there's no greenery, at least in this site plan, and I know it's not really in there, but it's not really in the streetscape views either. So I would like to see some reference to that, because when I look at this, I see a lot of X's on the Appendix B document that just shows where the trees are going, but not really an intent of where they'll go back. And but other than that, those were my two comments. Thank you.
Okay. Super, thank you, Brenda. Anyone else wish to comment? Yes, Sue?
Okay, unmuted. I think that thing that really throws the whole scaling off is the house to the right. If you're on page 200 and you cover up that little flat house to the right with your hand, the new house and the two houses to the left, they all scale just fine together. So really it's that one little oddity, the very low house on the bigger lot on that right-hand side that's throwing the scaling off on the new house, making the new house look so blocky in terms of the streetscape. So I don't have a huge I would really support sort of Jerry's comments. I love the garage in the basement. I can see here tremendous elements to try to bring some variety into the building inventory. It's not overly contemporary. It's just sort of a reimagination of traditional concepts. I'm actually really quite liking it. As you know, my tastes tend to be somewhat contemporary, but it really makes a difference if you just don't look at that house on the right in terms of the scaling of the other houses. And I think that's really what throws it off. That's it.
Thanks, Sue. And that house on the right is a new house, so it's a new addition to that streetscape that is sort of reverse engineering the rest of the street. Okay, so any other direct comments right now? Because I'm sure maybe when Gus talks, there may be some discussion going back and forward with him. I think Gus, you're unmuted, so you can go. And you've heard a few things. The coverage thing, you know, as I say, puzzles me. As I say, it doesn't. I mean, if this was 5 bedrooms and 8 bathrooms, I could see, but it's not. It's 3 bedrooms. I mean, it's not a huge home, and then the height was a bit of an issue and some of the landscaping. So you've heard the comments. So pile on.
Thank you, Drew, and good morning, committee members. I appreciate all the comments and feedback that you're providing. I'm going to give you a little bit of history and background on this project. About a year ago in October, our clients went and met with Carolyn and talked to Carolyn about purchasing this property and their intention to build a new home. And I believe the big discussion at that point was the garage and what to do with garages, because that seems to be a big issue with most heritage applications. So we took that to heart. We started design work. We did some preliminary conceptual drawings. And one of the first drawings I showed the client was a house similar in form to that, but instead of the garage being underneath the basement, it was a one-car garage door facing the street. And the width of the home was approximately the same width as what you see on the property currently. We looked at that design and we wanted to tighten it up. So we looked at the idea of how do we eliminate the garage. So we investigated the approach of putting the garage under the basement, because if you look at the topography, we're working with the topography, so we're not trying to force the garage into a location where it doesn't belong. So we looked at the site, we looked at the grading, and we found that we could make a driveway work with the existing topography. By tucking it underneath in the basement area, we were able to eliminate a lot of building mass on the east side of the building, which we felt met a lot of the heritage requirements as far as massing, garage, that sort. I mean, you can't see the garage at all. So we thought that was very favorable. So in March, we met with Carolyn and some committee members, and we showed them some original, initial design sketches to, just to start the discussions. We then had another meeting in June, which I believe was a Zoom meeting. And then again in October, we had another discussion about the project. We recognize the fact that we need variances. The front yard setback has been talked about, and the approach was to, try to blend in between the east and west properties to maintain some sense of streetscape and front setback. So we felt we met that with kind of a combined combination of 4 meters and 6 meters transitioning between the west and east. And also with respect to the setback was maintaining the minimum required setback on the west side, which was at least 2.4 meters. Because of the fact that we're providing a driveway down the east side, we're providing a 7-meter setback along the east side, which is providing a lot of open green space between the house to the east and the proposed dwelling at 187. And we know that that's having open space between buildings is a premium. Most times you want to stretch the building across the street, across the width of the property, max out the width as much as possible. But we actually gave that up in favor of tucking the garage down at the lower level. So we think that's very beneficial in the Heritage District. The height concern, we understand. We knew that there was going to be some possible pushback on that. We do meet the maximum of 10.5. We're actually at 10 meters, so we're well below the maximum. The bylaw in this area says it's measured to the midpoint of the roof. It's not to the top, so we're definitely below that. I actually sent a drawing. This is relating to George's comment this morning about seeing the existing and what's proposed. I did send a streetscape drawing to Carolyn this morning. She may have not received it in time, but I'm actually going to see if I can. I'm not sure if I can share my screen, but I mean it's a drawing that has been sent to Carolyn. You may have not got it this morning in time, but what it does is it shows an outline of the existing home with the proposed home shown dotted. So that may be something that you'll get to see in the near future. In that drawing, you'll see that the front gable of the forwardmost portion of the building, the lower gable is roughly the same height as the house to the west. And that's going to be the portion of the house that's closest to the street. And then obviously the main gable steps up higher, but it's set back at 6 meters. So we've been able to kind of break down the heights with different planes of the front wall and push back at 6 meters for the secondary wall. We and I believe Sue brought this up. If you look to the east, the property to the east, actually, the front faces, is that George Street or, forget the street. Anyways, the addition on the back is very, very, very low. So it's, not only is it low, it's downgrade from our property. So, you know, the topography isn't helping us there, but that addition at the back is very low, and we don't feel it contributes to the overall massing of the street. If you looked at the main height of that house, you know, that would be more in keeping, but we are looking at the backyard of that property and not really the side yard. So, you know, again, the only benefit there is that you have a lot of green space between the buildings, which again, we think is very helpful. I understand the comments with respect to greenery, and yes, we can definitely work towards adding a lot more trees and replacing trees. They're not shown on the drawings at this stage, but I know with site plan, we can be developing landscape plans and so forth to address some of those comments. With respect to the other variance required, which is for floor area from 30 to 42, the house being proposed is not a large house. It's 2,800 square feet. If you look at the floor plans, there's 3 bedrooms. You have the principal bedroom at the front and 2, you know, very small bedrooms, additional bedrooms at the back. So it's not a large house in today's standards. So we felt the variance on the floor area was reasonable. We don't currently need a variance on coverage. The variance on floor area may be adjusted depending how the actual interpretation of floor area is interpreted. Like, we're doing additional drawings to determine average grade around the building and so forth to deal with zoning comments. I hope that answers some of your questions, and I'm happy to answer any more that you might have. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Gus. Okay, Daniela, anybody else wanting to get in line? Jerry? Okay, Daniela, then Jerry.
Okay, I just wanted to say, I have to say, I was looking at page 200. The 199 streetscape gives a much better feel. I mean, I do want to say I really like the design of the house. I think it's really a lovely home. I just wanted to be really clear that my only issues are not the design of the house. I think it's lovely. It's I would so prefer to see that 6-meter setback maintained. And I'm just wondering about the age of the Japanese maple and the maple. It's so sad to give up trees, and I would want to know that there is going to be those are going to have to come out. That there's going to be a real plan to, and clarity on where, because I don't see a lot of opportunities for where those trees could go. Any newer, larger, mature trees, because you're either blocking those front windows, which are actually quite close to the road, or you've got the driveway, or you've got the entrance to the house. So I just wanted to clarify on my comments.
Okay, Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually, as we're discussing, I'm looking at Google bird's eye view of the site, and I'm seeing that from King Street now with the new proposal, you actually get a view of the lake from King Street because there's this whole new visual corridor. And in the wintertime, you can actually see the lake probably. Wow. But just a little side comment. But I just wanted to say, as I'm looking at this Google view of George Street and Front Street, and I see that the proposal for the new house, that there really needs to be an address of a corner condition to that southeast elevation, Gus. And, when you're looking at, even just Google Street Views, you can actually see that it becomes quite prominent. And it's a great opportunity to detail that area. I mean, the house on the corner of Front and George Street does it with its own style, but it's a great opportunity to address a corner condition at that point because you are creating that visual corridor. So it's a wonderful opportunity there. So it would be great for you to take advantage of that.
Okay, good. Thank you, Jerry. So, Gus and Carolyn, you had a lot of input. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in at this point. And by the way, Carrie, nice to see you. I did see you arrive some time ago, but anyway, I'm glad you made it. I think you've got a lot of input. Okay, and I think it's good input. I think it's positive input. I think it should help to refine the final product when it gets to us, and it should assist in the site planning process. So what we're left with now is simply to receive the report, which is bland. Okay, thank you, Dave. That sounds like a motion, or looks like a motion to me. Or you want to speak?
It will be a motion, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
you want to speak?
I would. I appreciate all the comments. Just for clarity, if Gus is still there, those are the only variances that are anticipated and that are on the table?
Thank you, Councillor Giddings. At this stage, yes, there may be, as I mentioned, we're having some discussions with zoning in trying to determine if some of the basement area is going to be included in the floor area calculations, just because of the way the grade drops down and all of a sudden that's now considered floor area. We needed to get some additional topographic information to do that, so we're just in the process of defining that. I think it obviously doesn't change the design of the home. I think it's more of a technical variance where, you know, we just look at the definition of the residential floor area and have to apply it in a technical way. Not that the house is getting larger, we just have to include part of the basement, which you typically do not do.
No, I understand and I appreciate that. And the balconies, front and rear, those are allowed in that suffix for the zoning?
That's correct.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks, Gus. And I'd be happy to move receipt, Mr. Chair.
And thank you, Councillor Giddings. Okay, so we've got a motion. Is there any further discussion? Okay, good. Anyone opposed to the motion? Seeing none, then the motion is carried. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Gus. Thank you, Alan. This is the one I'd hope we would have good discussion on, and that would take up whatever time it is that we have allocated by the town. Okay, so the next one is a review of a cultural heritage landscape at 1326 Bronte Road, and that looks like Susan.
Yep, thanks, Mr. Chair. So we have here another example of a developer being proactive in terms of trying to determine what the heritage resources are on a property before they come forward with a development application, which is something that we're very grateful for. The review that we're going to look at today is for 1326 Bronte Road, which is a red brick structure located on the west side of Bronte Road, and that would be just north of the designated white oak tree. So outside of Bronte Village proper, more in what would have used to be in certainly a more rural area. And you can see that here on the map. It would have been opposite the Sawwet golf course lands, which are now, of course, being developed. So the property is listed on the Heritage Register under Section 27 as a non-designated property of potential cultural heritage value, and it was recognized on the register for its potential value in its circa 1911 Edwardian and Queen Anne style brick house and potentially the barn. And so what has happened here is that heritage consultants have been retained actually by the potential purchaser of this property to prepare a heritage impact assessment to look at the overall cultural heritage value and also to determine if the property is considered a cultural heritage landscape. And so what we're looking at here today is not a demolition application. It is simply a kind of a proactive report to determine whether or not the property should be included, I guess, in the cultural heritage landscape strategy implementation in the future, or if we can answer the question now as to whether or not the property is a CHL. noting that additional reports will be required in the future to deal with the house. And I'll talk more about that in a second. So here we've got my same slide about the planning policy framework that we work within. And this is really important to acknowledge in each one of these reports the type of legislation that we're working with and how all of these things connect to each other, from the PPS of 2020 to the growth plan from 2019, and how they connect with the Heritage Act, and then how the Ontario Heritage Act requires the use of Ontario Regulation 906 as that evaluation tool. So the Heritage Impact Assessment that you have today provides a history of the property and its surrounding area, and assesses the cultural heritage value of the buildings and the landscape elements. And so it takes a look at the property as a whole. And essentially what the conclusion of the report is that while individual elements of the property, like the historic residence, are remaining, many of the surrounding attributes of the original historic property have been removed or are considered to have low integrity, meaning they've been heavily altered. And others are of more recent construction than we had anticipated, including that barn, which was built in the 1950s, not earlier than that. And so the historic residence does remain on the site with a good level of integrity. We further clarified the architectural style to be Edwardian design, loosely in a vernacular interpretation. The building is a balloon framing construction, which is slightly interesting. And then the location of the structure, just kind of in its general context, is important. When you're looking at the historic road grid and the lot survey, settlement of the surrounding area and approximate construction date, we find this to be an example of an early 20th century infill property in the larger farming landscape. That farming landscape certainly is transitioning from agricultural uses to more intense residential and other purposes, but the property, especially the residence, we find is representative of the transition from the rural to more urban lifeways in this area. And so the Ontario Regulation 906 evaluation, I would say, has been completed at a high level. It shows that the historic residence does have cultural heritage value. I think we'd want a little bit more kind of a deeper delve in terms of being able to provide information to designate that property in the end, such as a more formal listing of heritage attributes and a statement of cultural heritage value or interest. But the important thing that we're looking at today is whether or not the entire property itself is a cultural heritage landscape. And the Heritage Impact Assessment submitted is of the opinion that the CHL does not retain sufficient historic fabric to be considered representative or significant, and therefore is not worthy of designation under the Heritage Act as a cultural heritage landscape. And so what we're looking at then is confirmation that the property be removed from any further consideration of implementation of the cultural heritage landscape strategy. And what I would note about this property actually is that it wasn't even included in the original cultural heritage landscape inventory that we undertook in 2015. However, staff have been out to the site since that inventory. Questions were raised about the connections between the house and the barn and other landscape features, and we felt that this type of a report was definitely required before any type of developments could be considered for the property. And so that's what the potential purchaser is trying to do today, is to figure out, is this a CHL or not? And then they will be dealing with any historic elements on the property, such as the residence, in future development applications that we will certainly be a part of, we being both heritage planning staff and the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee and Council. And so just to take you through a couple of the photos from the report, you can see here we do have a fairly representative, a good representative example of an Edwardian style kind of vernacular farmhouse. Generally quite intact, from its historic brick cladding to that lovely shingle work in the gable. The front porch, I believe, has some elements that have been replaced, but generally is representative of the time. You can see here that we have several additions to the back. That two-story addition is likely original. The one-story addition to the rear is not. We would not consider that a historic feature of the property. Then coming around, I believe this is the north side of the house to that lovely little kind of one-story projecting bay on the two-story rear addition as well. This is looking at the rear of the house, actually looking towards Brawny Road. And then a couple of images of the barn that you can see, certainly a few more of those in the report, but the research does indicate that the structure isn't as old as we had originally thought it might be and does not actually have sufficient cultural heritage value in itself. And so the conclusion of staff is that the property should remain on the Oakville Heritage Register as a listed property, but we'd further clarify that to state that it's for the historic residents only. And then the property would be removed from any kind of consideration of further implementation of the cultural heritage landscape strategy, which would give the potential purchasers information they would need in order to consider an appropriate development for this area in the future. The potential purchasers then, I believe, plan to come back to the town with a proposal for the historic residents once they've finalized the purchase of the property, and that would be when staff would start looking at the mechanism of heritage designation and likely heritage conservation easement agreements to ensure its long-term conservation. But all of those details of that conservation strategy would be brought forward to the committee for review at a future date. And so we recommend that the property be removed from any future implementation of the cultural heritage landscape strategy, but that the property remain on the Oakville Register as a listed, not designated property for the residents only. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Super, thanks, Sue. Yep. Questions right away. Brenda's got her hand up. And Jerry. Okay, off you go, Brenda. And
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Sue, I have a bunch of questions. They're all relating to page 282 in the report, just as a point of reference. The first one just comes up as a clarification from your presentation. And thank you for that. It was very thorough. Which side of the house actually faces Bronte Road?
The front.
The front does. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. So, in looking at page 282, can you tell me where the house is on this map, right?
So I guess my preamble to looking at this page is that we do not have a development application yet for this property. This is a very high-level concept that came in for pre-consultation discussions, which is where we then told the applicant they needed to first resolve the question of a cultural heritage landscape and then deal with the historic residents. But on this very draft plan that has no official standing at all, they have proposed a relocation of the historic residents to that purple lot. So yes, they have certainly turned the residents so that the orientation is no longer facing Brawny Road. Staff have not provided any commentary on this because it certainly doesn't reflect any of our input so far, and it doesn't have, like I said, any legal standing, and we would certainly have a lot of discussion points if the house is to be relocated, which it certainly may be proposed to be, but that would have to be considered separate from the application that you're looking at today. And so I did confirm that when this heritage impact assessment was submitted, that because we're not formally endorsing the heritage impact assessment itself, we are not giving any type of standing to the draft plan, concept plan that's included in the heritage impact assessment, if that helps.
Okay. So maybe I could couch my comments in light of that to say that to me, one of the important things to do is to retain the heritage presence of a property, its visual presence. Even if we take this off of a cultural heritage landscape and say it's just a heritage property, my priority would be to see it retain its presence in the community, its visibility within the community, that it not be unnecessarily constrained in terms of the property being considered itself of value, so that, it is not shifted one way or another and not standing as an independent entity on a plot, is where I'm going.
Yeah, no, staff certainly agree with where you're coming from, and as I would say certainly have not endorsed the proposal that's included as a concept in this application. It needs work, and it certainly would be coming back to the Heritage Committee as part of a planning application that then, like I said, would also lead to a heritage designation, heritage easement agreement. So, well, I certainly appreciate your comments, and we'll make sure that they are passed on to the potential purchaser should they move forward with their development plans. I wouldn't put too much weight onto the concept that's proposed right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Because at the moment, it raises great concern.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because without prejudging the outcome of a more thorough review, the house looks like it could be designated as Part 4. And it is such a nice looking house, you wouldn't want to sort of lose it somewhere on a back lot surrounded by a bunch of townhouses. It needs to have some prominence. But by keeping it on the register, on the list, with the potential for Part 4, we've still got a placeholder on that. We still have some influence that we can exercise on its designation and its ultimate location.
Yes, certainly, Mr. Chair, and I believe that the Heritage Impact Assessment, as it's being submitted, certainly does say that the house is worthy of Part 4 designation. And it's just, we haven't arrived at the point where it makes sense to move forward with a notice of intention to designate yet, but I would say that that's certainly our intention in the future.
Good, thank you. Okay, Jerry?
Well, I'd like to echo Brenda's comments, and I'm happy to understand that this is still very, very preliminary and high level, as Sue mentioned. I would like to add a few more comments or continue with a few more comments. And I would like to say that is there an opportunity to ask the developer to, in a concept form, look at a development that retains the house in place before eliminating that possibility? And the second is, if it is moved, then the approach to the house retains a historic sense, whether it's the approach to the house, obviously the orientation of the house. It's very important to keep the orientation the way it is, and the visibility of the house. And also that there would be sufficient space around the house to be able to appreciate it, as Drew was saying, so that it's not tucked away behind high-density condo block A that they have here on the plan. And then the final would have been the initial, the ideas. Again, as we mentioned in the past, this is a heritage opportunity. This is a branding opportunity. And if they could incorporate some form of the history, the elements of this building within the new development, what a wonderful opportunity for branding and to distinguish this development from something else, because they already have it as a starting point from this site. So, if we can, look at this, and it's great, Sue, that you're involved at the first stage, because in the past we've been at the receiving end of a fully developed plan where it does tuck away the building somewhere, orients it totally differently. So it's a losing battle. But I'm happy to see that you're involved at the beginning and able to take in some of our comments at this point. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jay. Any other comments to Sue's proposal? Were you waving, Councillor Giddings, or just waving? Okay, well, what we've got then is the removal from the cultural heritage landscape strategy, where it came in as a bit of a tail end Charlie anyway. So it would come off that. But this is the big but. The house is still very much in our bailiwick, and we won't be losing any of the influence that the house has on the ultimate development. Okay, so on that understanding, can I have a motion to accept the staff recommendation? Thank you, George. If there's any further discussion, there's no further discussion. Anyone opposed to that motion? Okay, the motion is carried. Thank you very much. Right, good stuff. So where are we now? We're into St. Jude's Cemetery, and well, not in actual fact, but we're into the item on the agenda that deals with St. Jude's Cemetery, and I think that one's Carolyn.
Yes, correct. So our last two items are on our cultural heritage landscapes, and the first is St. Jude's Cemetery. And again, you all are familiar with where it's located, on the west side of downtown, on the south side of Lakeshore Road. Just to give a bit of a background on the planning policy and framework in regards to cultural heritage landscapes, the Livable Oakville plan states the town will protect and preserve CHLs by utilizing applicable legislation. These CHL provisions are included in the Ontario Heritage Act, the Planning Act, and the provincial policy statement. And the town also approved the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy in 2014, and this is being implemented, as you know, in 3 phases, the first being inventory, second, research and assessment, and the third, protection measures. In September 2017, Council adopted official plan amendments, which include CHLs as part of the town's updated urban structure to provide direction on how the town conserves significant cultural heritage landscapes. As well, the town adopted Bylaw 2018-019, which sets out the requirements for conservation plans for CHLs. So just to give an overview on the work that's been completed for the St. Jude's CHL that's being proposed by staff. In 2019, we completed the Phase 2 Cultural Heritage Evaluation Report. This was done in-house. And in September 2019, Council approved this report and recognized the area as a significant CHL. And at that time, they directed staff to move into Phase 3, which is the implementation of protection measures. So this is where we're at now. This past year, as staff, we completed the conservation plan, which you have in your agenda. We did this in consultation with Parks and Open Space staff. As you know, they're quite involved in terms of the cemetery and how they're the ones who maintain the property. So we wanted to ensure that they were confident that this conservation plan allows them to make alterations to the site that fits their mandate and their protocols, but also allows us to protect the heritage features of the property. And then this past February, the notice of intention to designate St. Jude Cemetery as a significant cultural heritage landscape was issued. Because of the pandemic and some timing issues with notices, we did reissue this in September 2020, just to be on the safe side. And we have not had any objections. So this is why we're moving forward with the conservation plan at this time. This document includes the descriptions of the alterations that are exempt from the heritage permit approval and those that require a heritage permit approval. It's not a maintenance plan. It's also not an operational or business management plan. The maintenance, meaning routine non-destructive actions that preserve the existing form, and the operations are exempt from town heritage review. For example, with this case being a cemetery, obviously we need to make sure that all the crews who work in the cemetery are able to do any burials or maintenance work to the property without having to get heritage approval each time. And this document shows them what they're permitted to do and what they do need to get heritage approval for. So again, activities that do not affect St. Jude's Cemetery's heritage attributes may also be exempt from heritage review. It also describes the heritage permit process and provides direction on how to manage future changes to the property while conserving the cultural heritage value. So at this point, staff are seeking feedback from Heritage Oakville on the draft conservation plan that you have in the agenda. The input provided by the committee will be considered for the final draft. This is proposed to go to Planning and Development Council on November 23rd, which is soon. If Heritage Oakville is satisfied with the document as attached or with minor amendments, staff recommend that they endorse the document today and recommend that the conservation plan go to Council for final approval. So I've got the staff recommendation here that the draft cultural heritage landscape conservation plan for St. Jude's Cemetery attached as Appendix A be endorsed. And I'm happy to answer any questions for you today.
Super, thank you, Carolyn. This has been a long project, this one, but it's a successful one. And I guess if they wanted to build another columbarium, would that be something that would be regarded as sort of a routine business activity in alignment with the purposes of the cemetery?
Through you, Mr. Chair, because that is a structure, we would still take a heritage permit for that. There are some view sheds within the conservation plan and in the evaluation report that were identified. So you'd want to make sure that we're not impacting any of these views. But also we have to ensure that they're not going in any place that would have any negative impact on the existing heritage features. Obviously, we're not going to be putting them next to any older grave sites. There's plenty of room for them to be building something new, and that is a plan, but we still would take that through for heritage permit approval.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Carol? Other George?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time or place, but on page 288, halfway down the page, it says that town staff prepared to proceed. However, there's objections to the OP 24. This appears in the next item as well, 4G, and I'm just wondering, I haven't heard, and I think I don't know whether it affects any discussions we may have, but are you, Carolyn, able to share with the committee where that stands?
Yeah, actually, Sue can present on this. She's got more background on it. So I'm just going to pass over to Sue who can answer your question.
Or do you want to leave it till the next item?
Go with this one.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the answer will be the same for both properties. So the OPA that we're referring to here is it's simply it's the ability to make amendments to the official plan in order to add provisions for specific cultural heritage landscapes to the livable Oakville plan. That was appealed by Club Link, and it is still before the LPAD. It's being rolled into the larger hearing, I believe. And so we're certainly able to proceed with everything that we're recommending to you today, but what we can't do is to put an official plan amendment in place to add either of these CHLs to the urban structure map or to include any additional provisions to the official planning policies that might be required for these sites. In terms of St. Jude's specifically, there wouldn't be much that would be needed because the official plan policies are already existing for the cemetery, so there just may be some minor tweaking. So we can move forward with everything that we're talking about today. It's just in the future you may see a number of official plan amendments that come forward that simply are kind of maybe treated more as housekeeping, depending on the resolution of that appeal at the LPAD. So everything's waiting until the resolution of that hearing, but we're perfectly fine to proceed with the protection measures that we have today.
Good. All right, George?
Good. Yeah, thank you. I'd forgotten, I guess, in the meantime, that we're still dealing with the Club Link, and I was just concerned that maybe there's someone else who had appealed on a different matter. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, George. Okay, any other questions? Okay, we have a staff recommendation. Can I have a mover? George has moved it. Is there any further discussion? Anyone opposed to the motion? The motion is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. So the next one is the harbour, and that's back to Susan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, we've got a good news story to close our meeting on today. The Oakville Harbor implementation of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy has been ongoing for several years now. Because it is such a large area, we did retain consultants to help us with this. The Phase 2 research and assessment report was concluded last year. And our heritage consulting team has undertaken a ton of public and stakeholder consultation throughout the Phase 2 research process, as well through this Phase 3 implementation of protection measures and the introduction of the draft conservation plan for the CHL, despite the interesting challenges posed by the pandemic this year. And so here we have just a map of the area. You can see that it's been divided into different kind of areas, and those just help us manage the conservation goals for each one of those particular areas within the draft plan. To be a little bit more specific with the guidelines within the draft plan. Obviously, a number of these slides are similar to what Carolyn just showed you. I don't think I need to go through them all over again, but I just kind of reiterate all of these planning tools work together, and the town, I think, has gone above and beyond in our measures to protect and recognize our cultural heritage landscapes, and that includes bylaw 2018-019. That does require us to actually put a conservation plan in place for all cultural heritage landscapes within 6 months of their designation. And so we're actually being very proactive in this, in that what council will see next week, hopefully, based on the decisions of the committee today, is the actual designation bylaw itself and the conservation plan, so that there's no lag time in between the designation, so that the people who own properties in this area will certainly know how to move forward and manage them. So the Phase 2 assessment for Oakville Harbor was completed by our amazing consultant team led by Common Bond Collective, working with Timmins Martell Consulting, Sean Hertel Planning, and Mark Laird. And that team actually continued on to the Phase 3 work as well after council approved the evaluation report last December. And so they immediately started work on the conservation plan, and we moved simultaneously to issue the notice of intention to designate for the Oakville Harbor in February. But again, as Carolyn noted for the last CHL we were looking at, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, all of the timelines of the Ontario Act were put on hold, and so we did reissue that notice in September of 2020, and we have received no objections. So there has been a ton of consultation ongoing for this plan in all phases. We have worked with town staff in a number of different departments, given that there are so many people involved in this area, from the Oakville Museum to our facilities and construction management, and definitely our parks and open space staff. In addition, there are two other property owners in this area. The region of Halton owns a small piece of land in the West Harbor area, and the Oakville Club is also within the boundaries of the Oakville Harbor Cultural Heritage Landscape, as well as being part of the Old Oakville Heritage Conservation District. We have also ensured that the conservation plans have been circulated to the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation, as well as Six Nations for their comment and feedback as well, which have been incorporated into the document. So the conservation plans obviously generally follow the same format. Oakville Harbor will look slightly different than the one that you see for St. Jude's, simply because the needs and uses of this area are very different. But generally speaking, we have the category A, B, and C alterations. Category A actions are not considered alterations to the heritage attributes, and that's why they're exempt from town review. Category B alterations are the ones that are approved by staff, and then Category C alterations are the ones that Heritage Oakville will see, and council will then hear from the Heritage Committee and from staff before making their decision on the proposed alteration. I also wanted to address the Harbor's master plan at this point, just because it's another town process that's been ongoing throughout our investigations into the cultural heritage landscapes of both Oakville Harbor and Bronte Harbor. And it's one of the reasons why Parks and Open Space staff have been so integral in the review of this draft conservation plan, because we need to ensure that the Harbor's master plan, which is completely separate from heritage, but that it is informed by the cultural heritage landscape within its boundaries. So at the moment, the Harbor's master plan is currently on hold because we have received an appeal to the Bronte Harbor and Bluffs cultural heritage landscape. And we have to address that before the Harbor's master plan can move forward, because it deals with both harbors at the same time. Therefore, we're not anticipating that the Harbor's master plan will be brought forward to council's consideration probably until late 2021, but it really all depends on the timing of the Conservation Review Board. Oops. So the conclusion that we're here to bring to you today is that we're seeking your feedback on the draft conservation plan. Any input that you provide will get turned around very quickly so that we can get this draft to Planning and Development Council next week on November 23rd. And so if you are generally satisfied with the conservation plan, or you have some minor amendments that you'd like to suggest, we can certainly take note of those, and we recommend that you would then endorse and recommend the conservation plan to Planning and Development Council for approval. And that is our recommendation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Super. Thank you, Sue. Another good news type report, something nice to deal with and put a smile on our faces. Any comments that you want to give to Sue on the report? We're generally happy. We've seen it at all its different stages coming through, so not much of this final report is a surprise to us. Jerry?
Yeah, it's a wonderful report, really, really intense. Just wanted to ask, and I know that when Aircliffe was doing its planning for potential future uses, is there an opportunity to bring back some of the opportunities for promenading down Navy Street to the lake with potential, the ice cream shops or something that would draw the Oakville community down to the harbor? Not quite as, as Burlington has done it aggressively, but how Oakville used to be, there was that little ice cream shop on the corner there of that little plaza. But I know in much of the planning, there isn't an opportunity for small retail areas that would invigorate the pedestrian experience. Just asking the question.
Sure. Actually, I think there's two things I want to answer. One is just to actually, you mentioned Ercliffe Estate, and it's good. I just need to clarify that Ercliffe, while it's part of the Oakville Harbor area, we have noted in this conservation plan that it does have its own cultural heritage landscape conservation plan that kind of supersedes this one. So for any changes that are proposed on the Ercliffe property, it would follow its own conservation plan, not this one. But then kind of in more general terms, Jerry, what you're talking about, I believe, are things that are being looked at through the Harbor's master plan process. And so I mean, what you've discussed, I don't think would, necessarily have any negative impacts on the heritage attributes that have been identified in the notice of intention to designate and then the bylaw that council will be looking at next week. It would certainly, depending on the amount of physical changes that are required, might require heritage permit approval. But as long as it's in line with the overall goals of heritage conservation, I think there's a lot of flexibility in this plan and with the heritage attributes of the Oakville Harbor to allow for a number of revitalization projects. The excellent work that's happened over in Tannery Park, all of that wasn't subject to this conservation plan, but I would say that heritage planning staff certainly had a chance to review it with the CHL in mind to ensure that, the things that are being proposed wouldn't have negatively impacted what we were trying to do with cultural heritage landscape. And so, the future works that are coming out of parks and open space, especially as they're the leads on the Harbor's master plan, will have the input of heritage planning staff, and depending on the significance of the alterations proposed, will certainly be coming to Heritage Oakville and Council. But those are all great things. We want this area to be used by the public. That is one of the the general kind of heritage attributes of the Oakville Harbor. The different types of use over the years, and maintaining a very strong and not just pedestrian use of the area, but recreational use as well too.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue. I'm glad you brought up Tannery Park because I noted that there's a draw to Tannery Park, and what most people do in Oakville is they go to a little place called Dolce Vita coffee shop on the corner of Lakeshore, and I forgot the name of the street, and then they meander to Tannery Park. But that location of the Dolce Vita little shop is tenuous because it's a little building, and that eventually that's prime opportunity for revitalization or development. So I know in the past it's been a bit of a struggle to get that kind of retail enterprise in that area. So I just wanted to make sure that the plan is open to that, or at least it is amenable and proactive to welcoming that kind of endeavor, because it does draw the people down and it makes our amenities accessible. Thank you.
Carrie?
Just pursuant to Jerry's comments, the north end of Shipyard Park is fairly underutilized, and to me, we have so few options to bring people down and enjoy the waterfront. I'm hoping that this doesn't impact any ability, whether it's an ice cream shop or perhaps a small restaurant, because we underutilize our waterfront.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. Hey, Carrie. Okay, good. Any other comments? Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to reassure my colleagues on the committee that it is very, very much on the horizon for that area. It's one that gets raised continually, not only by the public, but by council. And I know Councillor Giddings shares that. The Kerr BIA, along with the downtown BIA, are also very keen to have that experience because it's a huge linkage, not only to the lake shore, but the lake front. So we're looking at all kinds of opportunities. It may even be something where we can incorporate the log cabin into a little ice cream thing, you know, all kinds of stuff. But you're right, Carrie, that's very underutilized. But until we do the final renovations with the street and everything going down Francis Road there, I think those are a little premature at this point, but it is on the horizon.
Yep, good, thank you for that. And I was thinking about the log cabin too. It could be great for ice creams or something, or roast chestnuts. You could do something down there. And I hope that the town will, through its COVID thing, and Dave knows where I'm coming from, if it can get its mindset out of cars first, pedestrians 743rd. And get pedestrians first, and the opportunities for people to walk, and the opportunity to close off roadways from time to time to allow pedestrians to actually use it and park their car somewhere else. Anyway, that was just a minor rant, which I was allowed to do because we've done really well getting this far by 11:20. Okay, we need now to deal with the staff recommendation.
One thing, if I may, Mr. Chair, just before we move to close this off, I'd like to extend a great thank you to all of the stakeholders who participated in this process, because there were so many, from the Oakville power boats and the yacht squadron. So not just the property owners in the area, but the organizations who use the space too have been very active in reviewing some really lengthy documents, and we really do appreciate their input into this whole process. I think some of them hopefully might be watching today, so hopefully they can hear this thank you and know that their input is always welcome in our processes.
And we did meet some of the consultants in earlier presentations.
Yep.
So we've had the opportunity to value their work very much. Okay, can I have a motion then to accept the staff recommendation? Thank you, Brenda. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Anyone opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you very much, everybody. So the last thing, apart from adjournment, is that we've been given a list of all of the meeting dates for next year, and I suspect most of these will still be virtual, but who knows? Who knows? And our next meeting is December the 15th, and that would normally be the time when we all went down to the Queen's Head and enjoyed a bit of fun down there for the pint. But that's doubtful that that's going to happen this year. And there's no outdoor stuff unless we wanted to come in our parkers. We could probably do it then. But anyway, that's a shame. So before I take a motion for adjournment, George?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I haven't had the opportunity before, but I really want to make, before we adjourn this morning, to commend you on your handling of the chairmanship duties in the last, virtual meetings we've had for months now. And also, in light of today's package, Susan and Carolyn for the immense amount of work they've done to put all this together, let alone the months and months it's taken them to get it to this stage. So I commend all of you. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, John. It's a great team effort, and it's great. I know I and Jerry and the staff all love working with the members of the committee, and thank you all for your time and your input and the gift of that time, because you don't get paid. The other two get paid, but they don't get paid extra for coming here. Okay, so a motion to adjourn. Okay, thank you, Councillor Duddick. There'll be nobody opposed to that, so the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody, and stay safe.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes?
A motion to receive the information item?
Oh, we should have done that too. Right, we should have motioned to receive the information items. That's from Councillor Giddings. Nobody opposed to that. Thank you, Jill. You can mark that up in your minutes. Right, now we're gone. Thank you, and well within time.